Hi everyone, today we're going to create some vine brushes, stamp brushes, whatever you want to call them, those repeating shapes that you can use over and over in Procreate. We're going to do everything from creating the original stamp shape to creating and adjusting the brush settings and talking about how you could make them for sale. So you can use these vine brushes to make things like borders, and you could even create something like a knitting brush or a snow brush. So you could add this repeatable element to your illustrations or sell these to other creators. We'll finish up by using your brushes in a composition. So if you wanted to make these for sale, you would have a finished composition that displays how they can be used. I'm Liz Kohler Brown, a surface designer and hand letterer who loves helping people find their style and sell their work. This is why I'm focusing on some sellable assets on this channel. So if you want to keep getting some tutorials in your notifications about sellable assets, make sure to click subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you know every time a new tutorial comes out. So even if you don't know what kind of vine or stamp shapes you want to make, just dive into this project with me and I'll share some ideas with you along the way. So I'm starting here on a blank canvas that's 3000 by 3000 pixels. You could work at any size here. It does need to be square though. It's really important for the Procreate brush maker that everything is starting with a square. And it's also important that you work in pure black and white unless you want to have a transparent brush. But here I'm going to assume that you want a solid brush, not a transparent brush. So double tap in that black area to get pure black and then grab a brush. I'm going to use the rough inking brush from my Everything Bagel brush set, which you can get right below this video as a free download. So that's what I'll be using, but of course use any brush you want. I'm going to be doing holiday ornament style brushes, but of course you can do any kind of brush you want here. This could be a summer themed, you could do vines, you could do flowers, letters, whatever you want to do here. Just create some kind of fun shape that you would want to repeat. So I'm going to do some various star type shapes as an example, but go with whatever works for your style here. Let's start with this simple shape, and I'm keeping it super rough, just some fun loose shapes. Tap the Actions menu, Share, JPEG, Save as a JPEG. We're going to make this brush from scratch, so you can do this in any brush set. You could even create a new brush set. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a new brush set that is your vine set. So you might call it Vine. So in that new set, you can tap plus, and then on the shape, edit, import a photo, and drop that shape in there that you just made, and tap done. So things don't look quite right? We have this weird square. So if you tap edit again on your shape source and you 2-finger tap, you can get a black background and a white fill. So you can think of this as like a stencil. The black is the solid part and the white is the open part that's going to let ink through. So we need to adjust a few settings here before this becomes a nice vine brush. And I think the best place to start is in properties and size. So that way you're telling it when someone in Procreate turns the size all the way up, what is the absolute biggest that this brush can be? So you can go all the way up, but that might be a little bit excessive. Probably something around here is fine, and the minimum here, like you're not going to need to use this at the size of a grain of sand. So something like that will be the scale, but these are too close together, right? So now we need to go over to stroke path and adjust the spacing. So go as far apart as you want here, considering how close you want these shapes to be to each other, something like that maybe. And then if this is a shape that you want to kind of wiggle around as you draw, you could do the jitter, and that almost is like a snow brush right there. So if you want to do something like that, you can, or just leave the jitter off, and that way it just goes in a straight line following your brush. Next, let's go back to the shape section and play with the rotation. So you can see these are all straight up and down, but if you wanted them to be a little bit rotated as you draw, you just turn on that rotation. So as you can imagine, if you wanted kind of a fun scatter look, you might turn up the rotation a little bit and then turn up the jitter a little bit, and then you just get this fun, random, loose, playful pattern. Or if you want it to be more of like a pure vine brush where it just follows your brush, you can do it that way. So what I recommend you do here is just play with this process and repeat this over and over. I think the last step here should be naming it. So you can tap here and give it a name, tap here and put your name, tap here and sign your name. And then if you want to put your picture, you can. Obviously, this is only necessary if you're going to be distributing these in some way, but I do like to sign my brushes, so I recommend you do that as well. One thing I want to point out is that once you get your brush settings all set up, it's nice to be able to just duplicate that original brush you made and then change the shape just as we did in the beginning. So you don't actually have to recreate a new brush every single time, especially because you've already done your signature. Then you can just update the name. And of course, if you want to, at that point, play with the spacing or the rotation or anything like that, you can. I want to show you one more thing you may want to adjust depending on how you want your final vine brush to look. The opacity by default in Procreate is left up so that it becomes transparent if you don't press very hard, and it becomes solid if you do press hard. So if you want that to be off, just turn that opacity all the way down in the Apple Pencil pressure settings, and that way you're going to get a shape if you touch the screen at all, and it's never going to turn transparent. So that's an option. If you want that on or off, you can just decide in that section. So I'm going to repeat the same process, and in the end we should have a list of some nice pretty vine brushes. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll meet in the next step where we actually use these brushes on an ornament composition. I want to show you a fun one that you can do with leaves. So just create some leaves, and they're going to be facing to the side here. So the brush is going to go that way rather than up and down. So that's one thing to think about, is it's like the vine goes this way. So we're doing this sideways. Create some fun kind of leaf shapes. Share, JPEG, save. Then go back to your vine set. Of course, you can just duplicate one if you want. Shape, edit, just like we did before. Import a photo, put some leaves down. And when you first set them down, they're not going to follow the brush very well for this sort of vine shape. But if you go over to your rotation settings, which is in the shape, you can rotate this so that it will follow your brush a little bit better. So we've got this following. Then we might need to go and adjust the spacing a little so that they're a little bit closer to each other, and you can decide how far you want to go with this. Let's clear this drawing pad so you can see a little better. But basically we've got this fun little brush that actually follows your pencil. So that's why knowing where that rotation setting is in the shape is really important, and adjusting the spacing on the stroke path is equally important. It's question time. This is the time of the iPadArt breaks where I answer a question that one of you has asked me in the comments. So if you'd like me to answer a question that you ask in the future, go ahead and pop your questions in the comments. This is from one crafter to another who says, "Hi Liz, can you do a video about what happens after a design is sold? What files does the client get? Are Affinity Designer files okay to send, or do they have to be transferred to another program like Photoshop?" This is a great question, and it really depends a lot on the client. Some people are going to ask you for JPEGs. Some people are going to want layered SVG vector files. Other people are going to ask for some other file type. It's all over the board. A lot of times they want a specific size or a specific series of sizes that they'll explain to you in the contract, ideally. But the thing is, get as much detail as you can. Find out from them what kind of files do you need, what sizes do you need. If they don't know, you could propose some ideas, but I wouldn't say necessarily that you need Adobe to produce files for clients. Sometimes they ask for Adobe files, but you can just take an Affinity file, open it in the Illustrator app and export it as an AI file if you ever had a case where you needed like an AI file. That's happened to me maybe a few times in the history of my licensing, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would focus more on just finding out from the client specifically what they need for their printers. So hopefully you've played around with this a little bit and you have a variety of brushes. I just want to show you the ones that I've made so you can kind of get an idea if you're still struggling to come up with ideas. Here's some snow, and I made it so you can make it really small snow or big snow. I made these little cute stars that you could decorate ornaments with. I made 2 different types of evergreen so that if I want to just splash these on the background, there'd be a little bit of variation between the two. I made some stars, so you could do something like that. My favorite ones that I made are these sort of leaf floral type things. Let's make these a little bigger so you can see them. They almost have an Art Nouveau sort of feel. So if you watched one of my last iPadArt breaks where I talked about selling on Creative Market with clip art sets, this is a really good example. You could sell a Procreate brush set that was either holiday themed or Art Nouveau themed, or whatever theme you want to go with. These kind of stamps or brushes could be a great example of what you could do with that, because these actually work as stamps as well as brushes, so you could market these as both stamps and brushes. This is my knitting brush. I was thinking if you put these beside each other, it would look like knitting. So that would be fun. So I'm going to use these brushes now to create an ornament composition, and you can follow along with me or just do your own thing. But basically I'm going to make a bunch of fun ornament shapes and then make some little ornament tops and duplicate those onto each of the ornaments, and then we'll use our vine brushes to decorate them. So follow along with me or do your own thing. So now I have a really simple composition, just some straight lines and some cute little ornament shapes. And now we can come in and start filling these in and using our brushes to decorate them. So that's one thing about creating these stamps and brushes, is it kind of breaks up the process of creating so that you're not trying to think about everything at once. You're doing a little bit of shape, you're doing a little bit of color, you're kind of like splitting up your work into a lot of different phases, and I find that that helps me at least just not get overwhelmed by the creative process and think, oh, I'm not doing this right. It prevents you from overthinking, because it's like right now, all I have to do is make some stamp shapes. And for a lot of people who are just getting started, and for me too, sometimes I'm just like blocked, creative block. So that's where this process comes in and just sort of breaks it up into a fun little stamp making project, and then all of a sudden you're on your way to creating a composition. So that is my whole reasoning for doing this. People always ask me, why make stamps? Why make vines and stuff? For me, it's just part of my process. I like cutting things into different parts and not doing everything at once. So I'm going to continue the same process, just doing some really simple inking. And again, I'm using this rough inking brush from the Everything Bagel brush set, which you can get right below this video. Then we're going to just play around with some vine brushes here. So I'm going to start out by creating a new layer above my ornament layer and setting that to be a clipping mask. So then I can grab some of my brushes that I made and just play around with how they might look on some of these ornaments. So of course, there's no right or wrong answer here. This is a personal style thing. So you kind of just need to play around with these, see what happens. Sometimes you'll discover something as you poke around and play with different pieces. You might think, oh, this will look good with really small ones, and then you accidentally stamp one big one and think, well, actually it looks good with one big one. So take your time here, play around with your stamps, see what you can make them do, and then we'll meet up at the end. So I realized my snow is way too big, so I'm going and adjusting in the properties that maximum size and minimum size. So this is another good reason why it's a good idea to learn about brush settings, because sometimes you buy a brush and you realize, oh, I need to change some stuff about this. So that's a good time to go in and play with those brush settings until you get a style that you like. So here is a fun little composition made almost entirely with stamps, except for the few lines that I did. I used my vine stamps for the knitting pattern. I just stamped individual pieces for these little stars, I guess they're called. And in the end, you get this fun composition. But maybe this is just a way of advertising some vine brushes that you're selling. Maybe you make a huge set of these that's like holiday themed or botanical themed or something like that, that goes together in a nice marketable set, and then you create some beautiful images like this to display how to use them. Whatever you do with your brushes, whether you sell them or just use them for personal use, please share them with me so I can see them. You can tag me on Instagram so I can see both your shapes and the final composition that you make with them. So I hope you all enjoyed creating those vine brushes or stamp brushes with me. I would absolutely love to see what you made after you watch this tutorial. So share that with me. You can tag me on Instagram at Liz Kohler Brown so I can see what you made. So So remember to hit subscribe if you want to get these iPad art breaks in your notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. If you want to dive right into another fun creative project, you might like this Sellable SVG or clip art pack lesson. This is one of my most popular videos, and I think if you like this video, you're gonna like that one too. Another popular one is my pattern layouts video. People love creating patterns out of these fun little layouts, so check that one out as well.